I really considered quitting. They were like, we are not having this black woman and then she has an accent? What? No. The shocker was when I became the manager of a team of 4 media planners. They were revolting. I didn't belong. The only reason that I stick around is because of the ally and my boss at the time. But you know what hurt the most? That another black person was not liking me.
Mi gente, was good. Welcome to another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast brought to you by Plural. You already know it's your boy Pavel bringing you another special episode with another very special guest. Speaking of guests, the clip that you heard in the intro is with this week's guest, Yovy D. Before getting into the full conversation with Yovy, let me give you a little bit more context into who she is. Yovy is a Panamanian-born Afrocaribeña, specifically West Indian and Afro-descent. Her maternal grandmother and aunt actually raised her. She is the first of 9 grandchildren, and actually her mother's only child. Her mother, like many, came to the US looking for a better life. Yovy was able to land a bunch of dope roles in media and broadcasting. She's even worked across 2 different coasts. You'll hear her story about living in Miami and Los Angeles and the differences that come along with being a professional in those cities. She's worked for networks and brands like Fox, Sony, and Univision. Even on some programs you probably watch yourself, like Despierta America and Telefutura. Now that you know a little bit more about Yovy, let's get into the episode. Let's start where we always start off, with the word authenticity. It's such a buzzword. What does it mean to you when you hear the word?
Show yourself, be your most real self. That's what I look at it. But it's so hard because as we, from childhood to becoming an adult, we have developed shades of what we want to be or who we are.
Talk to me a little bit about growing up. Do you think it was easy to live in that definition of authenticity?
Yes, I was like the firstborn in a nucleus of my grandmother, my mom, my 2 uncles, and an aunt. So I was la primera nieta, la primera sobrina, like everything. And I was allowed to be myself right around pretty much all throughout school. Then once I became an adult, yes, I had to kind of change those things about me, especially stepping into the whole work world. But childhood was good. It was really fun. I really did. I really had some people will say hashtag only child, you were spoiled and get everything. But you know what? Sí, era la consentida, but I had a really harsh reality when it came to getting into adulting. Yes.
What happened when you got into adulting, as you mentioned? Like, what was the difference?
Let's go back that my family was a working class. I'm a byproduct of my ancestors that came from Jamaica, Grenada, and worked in the canal for the railroad, for the canal, as I mentioned. And I am just that recipient after 10 or 20 generations that when I was a kid already, I had an alien card. I had a green card. And I used to fly to the United States. My mom was very young. She came to the United States. And I was raised with my grandmother. So I had that dynamic going on. So with that being said, once I settled in Miami, started going to college, that was different. And
what was so different about Miami? Because people think about Miami and they must think, oh, there's mad Latinos and Latinas there.
Ignorance at the time, because that's what I want to call it. I'm seen and presented black, but my notion and awareness was Latina. I'm Latina, da da da. So I was embraced by the African American community, but culturally there were differences. And somewhere, unfortunately, also by the media, you are perceived differently. Miami is how I can say this, is somebody will come up to me and say, hey, tú eres venezolana o cubana puertorriqueña. That's Miami. Versus where I'm living now, LA is, ¿y por qué tú hablas español? And why you speak that Spanish so well? Because there's nothing in my name, unless you know my middle name, that is Spanish. That's where it becomes the shock, the culture shock, the difference.
How did you feel when you tell somebody you're Latina or you start speaking Spanish and they were surprised? Like, how did you feel?
I felt strange. I felt like, what do you mean? don't you see people like you feel like out of place, you feel awkward, you feel different, you feel that you don't belong. That's like, you're like, what do you mean? Where I come from, there's people that look like you in my family. There's everything there. And I was like, and then I started like feeling like bad. You feel like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah, no, that's deep. And potentially you may feel the need to like even stop explaining yourself. You like, yeah, otra vez.
Oh, yes. It started getting exhausting. I think I'm going for 10 years living here in LA, but at the beginning it was exhausting and I was getting mad. I was like, remember, I was getting upset. I remember I was with some friends and I was like, I know, I don't want to go through this. I have to be explaining everybody. And then it's like, oh my God, where you come from? ¿Por qué hablas el español tan bien? And I'm like, oh, seriously? And somebody explained to me the following. They say what happens between Miami is that Miami has certain demographic of Latinos that come from about privilege status
Yeah,
space, and then versus LA, they come from a lower class, working class, different.
yeah,
And maybe their educational levels, it does not meet with, that's the difference. That's how I was explained to it. And I was like, well, I'm like, okay, I can understand that to a
yeah,
certain extent.
yeah. And then it's interesting, and this I'm not surprised about, but you also started receiving some of maybe the same looks, reactions, or even you said the word resistance, which is powerful when you entered corporate or started working. Like, what was that experience like when you first walked in? And before talking about like the resistance, talk to me about how you showed up to work, like one of those early jobs. Because I think many times like our family tells us like, oh, no te ponga eso. You make sure you wear this, don't wear that.
Oh
Like,
my
how
goodness.
did you show up?
Well, let me rephrase. As I said, Pavel, I'm a fan of your show. So I heard that you have a story about your grandfather and that you had to dress in a certain way and look in a certain way. I kind of had that feedback from my grandmother, from my family. They're like, especially right now, I have my natural hair and I'm proud of it, but I like the I like the beret, so I'm good.
Yeah,
But I want to emphasize that at that time, relaxing my hair was the only thing I knew, because that's
yeah,
the women in my family. That's how it was. That's how I carry myself. I want to be honest. I'm like, I like myself, but I had low self esteem because of the lack of knowing the history of how we, Black people, Black Latinos, really were brought to America. Like that whole colonization, that was not part of my school agenda or explained correctly. They gave me the version of Cristobal Colon and that
yeah,
romanticized story that is
yeah,
not true. So I knew that I was Black. I had my grandparents talking about West Indian stories and that Jamaican and all that pride. It was there. But the sense of myself being Black and how I was treated, the shocker was when I became the manager of a team of 4 media planners. They were revolting. They were like, we are not having this Black woman and then she has an accent. What? No.
they said that.
That's what my boss. Thank God, she was amazing ally. But they were like, Joey, they're complaining. Joey, they don't like you. They saying that she doesn't know where she came from. What do you mean that she has this degree? Where she got it from? Like aggression behind aggression behind aggression. I was like, what in the world? And I had to take it in stride after the fact that I really considered quitting.
How did that make you feel hearing that feedback though? Because it's this interesting dynamic of like, oh my God, this is an amazing position. I need to celebrate. And then you get hit with this.
Yeah, because then I was at a point in my life, I was in my early 40s, and I was like, okay, I have to make it now. I was talking to recruiters, and I'm like, do I become a supervisor? How do I become a manager? And everybody was like, well, you need to get another master's degree, they have to give you that a position, or you have to really get another job or move up. And I was like, fine. Finally, that opportunity showed up after I was laid off, but it was all in good sense. But then once making it back to when I was in the new position, it made me feel like I didn't belong. The only reason that I stick around is because of the ally and my boss at the time. But you know what hurt the most? That another Black person was not liking me. Like sometimes we can work against each other,
Yeah.
but not by not knowing, by not understanding. And I was like, for real? And now it's like not even, let's say the truth, also other Latinos going against you. You're like, what in the world? I was
Yeah.
like, is this for real?
And that's the thing
I
too, is that people think once the diversity numbers improve, like we'll be perfect. Or if I work with a bunch of other Latinos, it'll be perfect. If I work with a bunch of other Black people, it'll be perfect. No, it's not the case at all. Like there's still sexism, classism, colorism. There's everything still happens within those dynamics. So just having people that look like you in an environment that doesn't fix everything.
it doesn't. But I want to say there is a good turnaround. I won those people over. I won those people
Really?
over, yes, with integrity. But it also it had to do with me, like self assurance. And I said, "F this. I'm gonna speak, and I'm gonna let my job speak for itself." And it's not that I'm like, okay, I want to become friends with these people. No, 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 no. I'm gonna just let my personality, my integrity, my aura to deliver. And then there was a turnaround. There was a turnaround, and it took a while. Some, and I felt really good. But that again, it was because I had the back support of my bosses strongly backing me up. If it wasn't for them, then yeah, I would have been toast.
If let's say you didn't necessarily have that close relationship with your manager, your bosses, do you think instead you would have just looked for another position?
Oh yeah, I was looking. This was the dream job for me, and pretty much around that time, getting so many reporting about my performance or about how I was delegating or the way that I talk. They're
What did they
like,
say about the way you talk?
oh, that I was too harsh. That I was like, was I little aggressive? Possibly. Yeah. It's just the way that I talk. I'm like, okay, I needed to tone it down, but also I needed to strive more in my emails also as well. Like,
What do you
there was
mean?
a situation where somebody was just really coming after me, and I was like, listen, first of all, I do not like the tone of how you're addressing me, and we need to change that. If you need any further help, I would be more than glad to, assist you in what you need. But like, and after that, I had to just put my foot down.
But that's scary.
It is.
Like this idea of putting your foot down, because the story that we often tell ourselves is like, ugh, I'm about to get fired, I really need this job, this and that. And that's why most of us continue to fake it, continue to hide ourselves. What gave you the confidence in those experiences to be like, fuck it?
Well, like you just mentioned, I needed this job. I had student loans. But then again, at the same token, I was honestly debating, and I was like, is this worth my mental? I started not showing off for work or calling sick. And that's where my boss was like, wait a minute, um, what's going on? How can I help you? And as I said, that was kind of the support that
Wait,
I
wait, wait,
had.
wait. Break that down a little bit. So you were experiencing things at work, and then it got to the point where you started taking like time off and days off, and then your manager noticed, and that's where you had that conversation.
Yes.
Interesting. So what was that conversation like with your manager? Like what did they tell you? As far as like, hey, I noticed this. I just want to check in with you. And that's the dope thing about having a strong relationship with a person, that you can have those open conversations around like, yeah, you're right. I have been taking off and this is why. And then they even ask you, how can I help? Like that's beautiful.
Yes, no, her name Edna. I'll give you a shout out. The reason that I was like kind of withdrawing is because I was in a relationship, and it was not a good relationship for me. It was kind of like it was a long distance relationship. There was verbal abuse, domestic violence, verbally, mentally, and I was checking out. I was literally, and that was affecting everything else. Yeah.
Well, and add the things that you're experiencing at work.
Exactly.
Right.
Adding to the fact the microaggressions
Right.
on my work ethic. Yes.
So how did it feel for like just to have that conversation with your manager, and I mean her offering support and trying to help you through that? Like how did you feel?
Oh, safe. She's another Latina, but she was just really well rounded, world class. I guess she felt compelled on my story, but I felt safe. I really, both of my bosses really supported. And who was my direct boss? She heard about me. She never had worked with me, but she has such an integrity and understanding of, I guess, the corporate culture.
And I'm thinking back to, the experiences that you were having at work. Like, I know you spoke about it to your manager, but that's because she prompted the conversation. She's the one that approached you to talk about it, right?
Right.
Often I don't think we talk about our work experiences openly, right? Because we're embarrassed, we're ashamed, we think people won't understand. Who did you tell about this experience, if anybody?
Thank God I have a support system of friends. My friends really was my support system in and out. And also, God, I surrendered to my beliefs and understand that, yes, I'm going through this hurdle, but after that hurdle, I'm going to become stronger. And I did. I really proved myself. Also, the fact that even I living in Miami, my family was close by. Living in LA, they were not. So that gave me another layer of grit and strength. I was like, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to make it, but it's not a sink and swim kind of situation here. We're going forward no matter what.
Yeah. Nah, I get that. Were there any other instances where you felt the need to hide who you were a little bit, kind of like in the workspace?
In those days of hurdle, I'm not going to lie to you. I am the crier. I will cry. People will say, no, how you dare? Why would you cry in front of everybody? Everybody's going to know that you're weak. I'm like bawling, because I'm like, what I'm not going to do here is I'm going to have either an anxiety attack or a heart attack or anything. I'm just tears coming out of my, and one of my employees or co-workers were there, and she was like, are you okay? And I was like, let me just be. Yes, I could run to the restroom and cry it out, but there were moments that you will be sitting right at your desk and just tears will just come out of my and roll down my face, and I was like, it is what it is. I just have to let it out, and then I will be fine.
But there were times where you didn't feel comfortable doing that.
No, I didn't care. But that's been like, I remember hearing people like, oh, you don't do that. I'm like, I am going to be, at that moment, I am going to be the most authentic self in my version. I'm like, if something's bothering me or it hurts me, I'm going to cry it out. I'm not going to be rude. I'll do what I have to do. And then I'll take my tissue and that's it. I will not shy away about that. Some people will ask you, what's wrong? But some people will just not say anything, and that's okay. I didn't expect it. I was not seeking for attention. I was seeking for my relief personally.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. As far as like, I think everyone has a different way of transferring that energy that they're feeling onto something else. I forgot who said this, but it's like energy is never lost. It's merely transferred from one being to another, something like that, right? Like if someone's feeling upset, they'll transfer the energy to like a punching bag or the weights, or they'll leave it in the park during their run.
Yeah.
And in your experience, you're sort of like, I have this energy inside of me and I need to let it out. The tears was your way of sort of like letting it out. But then there's just like this societal idea around, oh shit, she's crying. What the fuck is happening? Is she gonna sue us? I don't know, like all these sort of thoughts, right? And then you probably have the idea of like, oh my God, like you said, like they're gonna think I'm weak.
Yes.
But that was just your way to feel better.
Yes. Yes. Just, I'll be doing whatever I have to do. And then that's it. Let it go.
Yeah. That is a way that you did feel comfortable being yourself. But what are some ways where you didn't and you felt the need to like hide?
I got unfortunately in the bad habit of eating like this, but then I was stopping that. And then thank God my place of work would have a space, and I would go to the cafeteria or the lunchroom. And I was like, no, I have to take this food to the cafeteria. Because it's like, how many times you're going to eat salad, Pavel? It's like, you need your fricase de pollo and arroz and all that good stuff. And I want to be proud of myself that I know how to cook really well. And that's what I would do. Because then everybody's like, it smells so good. But I'm like, I brought only for myself. It's like, I don't know.
Also, no one ever said anything negative about it. You just felt like you just didn't want anyone to talk about it.
No, exactly. Nobody said it. Everybody's like,
Isn't that interesting though that like the comments that you got were all positive and complimentary, but you still didn't want to hear it? It's interesting. You know what I mean?
yeah. And then he's like, what do you have there, Joey? Everything that Joey brings is so good. But then you're like, certain things you want to keep it to yourself. They tell you to keep it professional. You're not supposed to eat at your desk, or you're not supposed to do certain things and follow certain protocols. And even if you are the boss or manager of your department, you have to keep certain, how you call that? Present yourself in such a way. I'm a leader, but I'm not. That title doesn't go over my head. That's how I saw myself. I would not, you cannot help it. People are going to talk behind you regardless of what
Yeah.
you do, how you are.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's interesting. I just think people are gonna listen to it and be like, wait, but I thought I could compliment people's food, but I think everyone is different. You know what I mean? Like people, there's some people that bring food in and they may love that someone
They
said that
show
smells
off.
good,
Yeah.
right? But in your case, like that wasn't necessarily the case. So I just think it's interesting. Um, let's talk about this Miami to Los Angeles change for you, because that seems to be like a very influential, that seems to be a very impactful moment in your life, and one that caused positive growth from an authenticity standpoint. Like, what was the impact that that had on you?
Thanks to LA was the birth of my podcast, Trumpeta Chronicles, too, because of the generational trauma that I had. And obviously, I needed to work on that. The identity crisis or existential identity that I was questioned. And also, it was that lack of representation because, as much as I was embraced or accepted by the African American community, and then you hang out with Latinos, other Latinos, it was just not feeling right until the assassination of George Floyd. And that's where things really trigger that white elephant in the room in Latinos about colorism and self hate and discrimination and classism. It really disrupted everything that I knew and how I was. And now seeing this flourish, this community, we've been here all the time, but we were being labeled or in case of saying, well, anybody that looks black belongs here in LA. That's how it is. You're black, you're Latin, white, or you're Mexican. That's it. Anything else is like versus Miami, you have Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and navigating your experience is different. The circle of people is different.
So in Miami, you didn't feel accepted because, sure, there are many Latinos there, but they aren't necessarily Latinos and Latinas that necessarily look like you.
My
Um,
experience in Miami, I never felt discomfort or out of place. My experience in LA, I feel uncomfortable and out of place.
Interesting, interesting.
I don't feel misplaced when I'm hanging out in New York. I feel amazing when I'm in New York because there's people that look like me. It's just a different vibe.
Do you think that was like socially as well as professionally?
In my environments in Miami was either I'm one of two people that are black or the only woman that is black. But I felt comfortable because it was more Spanish driven conversations. When I'm in LA, I am somebody that by profile or appearance may look Hispanic or Latino, but there are fourth, fifth generation Americans. And even if they have the name Rivera, Rodriguez, whatever, their culture, the perception of what they see is already influenced by what they've been taught or projected negatively. That's what happens in LA. So it takes a lot of energy to say, can you get to know me first before what you see or what you perceive or project, instead of just automatically stereotyping me and judging me by what you believe.
Yeah. So in that instance, there seems to be like less just culture being felt around. And I felt like that in a lot of scenarios. What I tended to do back in the day was I would try to fit in because,
Mm-hmm.
and by fitting in, like you hear this a lot with women on the podcast that have been like, they started binge watching ESPN because like they worked with a bunch of men. Like, did you try to fit in any ways?
I heard about your story about that you devoted your weekends to, watch Riverdale and all of that.
Yeah.
I personally did not find myself doing that. But the thing is that what I would have this issue, maybe with code switching, may that be in Miami or here, professionally in my environment, was I was very preserved to myself. And I remember there was a coworker that would tell me, Joey, I like your style. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I was like, you come here, you say hello, how are you? How's your family? And you keep it going. I say, thank you. She's like, you're not involving no chisme. Just keep it together. And I say, yeah. I'm like, I didn't. I just took it in. I was like, thank you. Because I learned it really early on. I was like, I am not gonna sell myself. I just did not find it right. It's just me personally. And I was like, yo no voy a estar being no teacher's pet. No, we're not doing that.
Who
And I'm
who
like,
taught who taught you that? And I'm wondering, like, why did you feel the need to do that? Is it because you didn't feel safe?
It's part of the office politics. Office politics were certain behaviors push you in a position where they think that you need to give or project. Hey, we are family, so yeah. But I'm not gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you what you need to know about me. And that's pretty much it. That's how I'm gonna keep it.
But who taught you that though?
Who taught me that? I guess by observing, I guess college also as well, the law and ethics class, and realizing that because they're saying that people that take advantage, the more you put out there, and people immediately want to know also what hurts you, what makes you upset or mad, and get that data from you, then they know how to attack you.
But has this happened to you? Have you felt like you've been taken advantage of after like sharing
Oh yeah,
information?
because I'm a people pleaser, and I know that I was like the goody two shoes, keep it together. Yes, I was like, and then at one point I was like, I experienced because I also have a sense of caring way too much. I had to obviously get that together. And I found myself in situations where, yes, I had to check myself and say, no, we ain't doing that.
Yeah, tell me about a time where you felt like, all right, you know what? Let me open up. Let me do this. But you felt like that information was used to take advantage of you.
A coworker, something came about, and then she was like, "But Joey, you said this and this," and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I took it back, and I was like,
Like
"No."
that was a private conversation. What happened?
Yeah, I'm like, I did not make the disclaimer that it was between you and I, and why you would say something like that, and I was like, it was not bad, thank God, but it was like, okay, I'm gonna have to be careful with you. I have to be careful with what I say.
Yeah. No, that's funny. I think a lot of people could relate to that.
Yeah, like, and then you have to really say, okay, what are we doing? Are we in a town hall meeting? Are we having lunch at the cafeteria or the lunchroom, or are we actually outdoors? In what kind of parameter? And even still, I was really, really cautious. And then people will have a shock because I had maybe have two personas: the persona that was in the office, and then the persona that I will be invited into other activities, and they were like, oh my God, even the way that I dress, I was very put together, what is it, a nice blouse, shirt, but then when I will go out, like a couple of skin alter tops, and they were like, oh my goodness. I was like, is this the same person? And I'm like, yeah, I love to have fun too, music, salsa, all of that is good.
But even you said earlier in the conversation that some of this becomes exhausting, like
It's
having the two different personas. Like, I'm wondering for you these days, do you still have those two personas?
No, no, not anymore. No, thank
Why?
God.
Why
No.
not?
There's no need. I'm like, there's no need. I just don't have to explain you anything. Now I'm like, when somebody says, qué bien hablas el español, digo, sí. Y tú también lo hablas muy bien. That's all I have to say.
Nice. What's one thing that continues to inspire you to continue being your most authentic self, even at work?
To help motivate people to be themselves. I wanted to create a space for that person, Black, Latino, Afro Latino, saying you're welcome, is never late. Oh yes, we learned this now. It's okay to unlearn and relearn. That's my message. it's never too late to start all over again, and just keep on pushing and going.
Mi gente, that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed what you heard, please do us a favor, leave us a rating and review. The only way we're going to redefine professionalism is to ensure that these stories get heard and seen by more people. Your engagement is going to help us do that.